What happens, I think, when someone is way ahead of their time, and that was the case with Dr. Folkman and angiogenesis and tumors. He was very ahead of his time, and so people thought that the ideas were far out, that they weren't going to be true. But what happens is if you look at science, what you see is that most of the people who have great ideas way ahead of their time are thought to be wrong. And in fact, Dr. Folkman was often proud when people disagreed with what he thought, because he once told me that if everybody immediately agreed with what you said, then it was too obvious, and it wasn't really a great leap of vision. But if everybody disagreed, it either meant that you were wrong or you were right and way ahead. And so he always took pride in having people criticize his work and then proving them wrong. The wonderful thing about Dr. Folkman was his relationship with people that he worked with. And that took a couple of forms. One, on the scientific side, Dr. Folkman was trained as a surgeon. And he was really, in a way, self-taught as a scientist. And because he knew that, and because he knew that in order to solve a problem as large as angiogenesis, you would need to assemble a team, he assembled a team right from the very beginning. In the 1970s, he started to assemble a team that had people who were cell biologists, molecular biologists, electron microscopists, pharmacologists, chemists, ophthalmologists, oncologists, an enormous team that he had to raise the funds for. He had to attract the talent to do that. And once that team was in place, the next amazing thing was how he worked with everyone. And his method was a method of encouragement. So when you had a result, you might not be sure of the result, but when you went to Dr. Folkman, you came out believing in that result. You came out, he would say things like, "Oh, Dr. Smith, this is the most incredible result I've ever seen, and we're going to call this the Smith effect." And then he'd go down the hall to Jones, and he'd see Jones's work, and he'd say, "Dr. Jones, I've never seen anything as amazing as this. Everyone's going to know this as the Jones phenomenon, and I'm going to go out and in my lectures, I'm going to tell everyone about the Jones phenomenon." So it was a method of encouragement and infectious enthusiasm. And after you had shown him your result, you wanted to go and work harder on that because it seemed so important after he had thought about it and linked that to something that you never thought of, something completely out of the blue. And he would have heard something else in science and said, this might relate to that thing that I heard at a lecture yesterday, and it will give you a whole new direction to go. So I would say that what really was special about the way he operated, and he did establish one of the largest, working laboratories, I think, in Boston. But it wasn't just about the size, it was about the necessity to have a large group and the necessity to bring people in. We now talk about, at Children's Hospital, we've now set up multidisciplinary programs. It used to be that every department of cardiology, department of neurology, department of endocrinology would have research within that department. And it's thought now, just in the last 5 years, that the most important thing you can do is build up new units that have people from all sorts of different scientific training. Put them all together, or medical training, put them all together and call it a multidisciplinary program. Well, Dr. Folkman's been doing that for the last, almost 40 years. He knew the importance of having all those people and then stimulating them to want to work together. Another aspect of the group that he built was its collegiality. It was really a lot like a family. And people would share reagents, people would sometimes share fellows or graduate students. There was a lot of collaboration and a feeling that we were really all in something together. He would also enhance careers. he must, if there are 365 days in a year, he probably received 700 invitations to speak each year. And he would take many of them. One reason was that he thought that it was important, if you start a field, which is what he did with angiogenesis, he thought it was important to publicize the field. And if you asked him to go to Yale, he would go, but if you asked him to go to, Bolivia State University, where they may not be as many famous scientists, he would go there too. He wanted to explain to the world the importance of angiogenesis. That's largely why he traveled as much as he did. But he would also take some of the invitations and go to his colleagues and say, I'm not able to do this particular one, and I would like you to do it. Or he would have a review chapter to write, and he would say, I'm not able to write this particular review chapter, or I'd like you to do it, or let's do it together. He was always looking for ways to advance the science and advance the careers of the people who worked with him.